Hello, everyone. We have our final panel session at the catwalk here today. Please welcome Emily, Marilyn, and Rachel to the catwalk.
Come on. Woo! Last session. Fantastic. So, the session title is Vegan Fashion and its new customer base. Is vegan just a fad or is it here to stay? So, first part, we're going to go into small introductions and what your main focus is. So, I'll start with Emily over here. Would you mind introducing yourself and sharing your main focus?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Emily Gordon-Smith. I work for Stylus Media Group. Stylus is a platform where we deliver lots of incredible insights around trends for the future and deliver a really incredible advisory service as well. And sustainability is one of our main pillars of information to inform our clients. So we work with all kinds of global brands and smaller clients, but sustainability really being one of our key focuses in terms of everything that we do.
Fantastic. And Emily?
Marilyn,
sorry.
Yes, I'm Marilyn. I work at the Macarthur Foundation, specifically focused on the circular business models for the fashion initiative. And the whole mission of the foundation is to accelerate the transition towards a circular economy in the world. And I work within the fashion team in there.
Exciting. And I love how we're starting to have conversations around both things, veganism, circularity, how we build everything together. So you might have seen me here earlier, but I'm Rachel Sheila Khan. I'm founder of Circular Earth and the Ecosystem Incubator. I'm a fashion sustainability consultant, helping businesses to start up strong in sustainability or look at how they might collaborate together. So we're going to start with our first question. And very much for you, Emily, looking into trends and how veganism has become much more into the forefront over the past years. The Vegan Society share that there are around 600,000 vegans in the UK based on information in 2019. That's a big chunk of society, right? Who will be looking for not only vegan options, but sustainable options. What have you seen as being the main focus points in vegan fashion in terms of trend?
Well, I think it's worth just refocusing on those stats. As you say, 600,000 vegans in the UK. 1 in 12 parents is now bringing their children up as vegan, which is an incredible stat. So that's 1 in 12 of all of the future generation potentially are going to be completely embedded in vegan lifestyles. Just last year, searches on Google globally went up by 5,000% on the word vegan. So this is a trend that isn't going to be going away. And for us, vegan lifestyle is not just about food and beverage, etc. It's really all-encompassing. So it really is about how you dress yourself, the lifestyle that you live, etc. So for us at Stylus, it's all completely encompassing. So I'm sure as we go deep dive into the other questions, I can talk some more into that.
Absolutely. And Marilyn, how do you see the vegan trends working in circularity?
So it's, I guess, for a circular economy to work, by design, we need to eliminate waste, so keep products and materials in circulation, and regenerate nature. So from that point of view, I think like the vegan trends are very interesting in terms of material innovation and what they've put forward. So I think that ideally we want to see materials that are, leaving nature better off with them, but by making them, and then we want to see more systems in place to keep these materials and products circulating for as long as possible. So I think right now it's interesting how this trend has put this innovation challenge to the industry to really start coming up with new ways of making products and materials.
Yeah, because it's an innovation challenge, whether you're making something that's vegan or whether you're making a regenerative cotton or whether you're working with leather or whatever, it's still a circular conversation that you have to have per material, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
yeah, I think so. One of the key levers is for these products to be durable. So the longer they can last in the economy, then the better it is for the circular economy, because then you can have systems and services that keep them in circulation for as long as possible. So this is really interesting from a material perspective, because right now I think that in some alternatives, like leather, for example, so like leather alternatives, there have been a lot of innovation happening lately, because at the beginning they were not as durable as leather is, and neither as recyclable, because they were never monomaterial, and that's where current technologies can actually recycle in an economically viable way right now. So it's really interesting how it's put this really big challenge to the industry into how can they recreate materials so that they are more, I guess, vegan friendly, but also environmentally friendly. And a good example actually out there is viscose, because that can easily or easier replace silk and silk, like the silk field. And there have been a lot of now new ways of coming with these, viscose and cellulosic type of fibers that can actually replace it.
yeah, there's loads of cellulosic fibers from kind of even stuff like lotus flower and things like that are really interesting in replacing silk from the silkworm, which you can still get in a kind of piece silk way. However, these new alternatives for those amazing amount of people that are going to be interested in it.
Yeah, there's some incredible innovations like orange fibre for silk, which is a really good one. But then you go back to something like the 13th century, and in Japan, they were using things like banana fibre to make silk fabrics. So there are plenty of biomaterial and plant-based alternatives to silk, which obviously involves, is not vegan. And I guess the other thing is really thinking about, as you say, Marilyn, is the thing about durability. So something like silk or wool or leather, I think, has formed a focus of the vegan dialogue, because they are fabrics that are very durable and therefore much better alternatives to any kind of synthetics, and are recyclable. So, it's a sort of double whammy, if you like. So for us, we're kind of focusing on alternatives to leather, more eco-friendly alternatives to cotton types, silk alternatives, and how to create wool in a more sustainable way.
Yeah, super interesting. And it's so interesting, we could go on for hours talking about all of the different fabrics, right? It's just like, it's so exciting. But it leads into the next question quite nicely. Curious as to what your thoughts are the use of plastic in these vegan alternatives, because of course sometimes that happens. They're trying to make it more durable, and plastic enters into that system. Yeah. What, in your opinion, start with Marilyn, are there nuances in that?
Yeah, I think the reason of why they added it is so that they can last for a long time, and that they can be used for more without it, degrading or having, I guess, signs of wear. But then the issue with putting plastic in it is that you automatically make it not recyclable. So at the end of the use, whenever that comes, then you cannot make it back into that same product again. And it is not economically viable to recycle it, because sometimes it involves loads of human labor to put it apart, or loads of chemicals to take it apart, which actually end up polluting the system even more, and heat. So you need to heat it sometimes, so then it's more energy and more polluting to make it into the product again, so nobody does it. And if nobody recycles at the end of its life, then it ends up going to landfill anyways. So it actually defeats the purpose of what it is. So that's why, from a circular economy perspective, keeping it in circulation and for as long as possible is one of the biggest levers for it, and one of the key activities that I think that collectively the industry needs to work forward into. How do we create these systems in place so that they are kept in circulation? So not only that the product is super durable, but actually what's the system that needs to go with it so that it can actually be used for as long as it can. Because right now we have amazing durable products sometimes, and they're still going to landfill because we don't have these systems in place. So.
Absolutely agree.
I think alternatives to leather are really interesting here because there have been so many interesting innovations coming through, like Pinatex, which is made from waste pineapple leaves, like Milo, which is made from mycelium in a laboratory. But actually those innovations still involve a degree of synthetic fabrication in their manufacture, which means that they're not totally biodegradable. But we're seeing things come through now, just being more future-facing, and things for everyone to look out for. Things like Slow Factory's Slow Hide, which is in development, which is 100% plant waste-based, with no synthetics. And I think this is an area that's moving so rapidly, it's super important just to really keep up to speed with what are the latest innovations, what are the latest developments, because in actual fact, we're getting really close to a place where there is a true vegan alternative without plastics and without synthetics, which is super exciting.
That's exciting, yeah. That's fully durable also?
Yeah, and fully durable, exactly.
Well, maybe we should reconvene next season and see what's happened.
Yeah.
And that's the joy of sustainability, is that you're constantly finding new things, and things are being innovated as we speak, which is exciting. The same in circularity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And okay, for anyone here who is a weird vegan like me, in terms of utilizing what we have, you're obviously not going to go, oh hey, I've become a vegan. Shall I just get rid of my whole of my wardrobe of leather, accessories, for instance, and things like that? Is it better to keep it in function?
Yeah, within the current system, the best thing that you can do is use what you own for longest, and not try to suddenly change your wardrobe completely and try to buy the vegan alternative or whichever other alternative there are there, even if it's from regenerative cotton and everything else, because it takes so much human resources to make a product and to grow any material, like cotton or wool, or even like make viscose and stuff. There's energy involved, there's loads of labor involved, so and behind every single item, there's like loads of resources already embedded in it. So the best that you can do is like to own what you have to bits. And whenever you have holes and stuff, try to find ways or creative ways to remaking it or repair it, or try to pimp it up so that you can keep using it. And then if you got bored of it, there are now plenty of platforms where you can sell it again if it still can be used, or make sure that you put it in the correct disposable way, like those textile recycling bins, so that it doesn't end up in in landfill or being incinerated straight away. So I think that's one of the best things. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that you suddenly cannot wear, your fast fashion stuff and have to buy like a whole new wardrobe, and then it defeats the purpose of the whole circular economy and making what already exists last for long and be worthy of all the resources already there.
Yeah, totally use what you're there. And Emily, have you seen trends coming forward with reuse?
Yeah, definitely. Another big thing that we need to think about is the longevity of a product in tandem with buying the right kinds of new products. So what we're encouraging buyers and designers to do is to really think about what are the kind of fabric bases that we should be working with in order that consumers do have the opportunity to really think about the longevity and the value in a product. So thinking about things like good quality leather that has true durability, or vegan alternatives, things like wool, which is maybe created through now what we're seeing is regenerative agriculture coming into play with wool farming, which is really super exciting. A lot of exciting things happening, particularly around in New Zealand and in other territories. Looking at really sustainable alternatives to water guzzling cotton, as we mentioned earlier. And also, as I said, there's other alternatives to silk. So again, using waste materials. So really sort of working these exciting new material innovations, or some of them quite ancient. Things like flax for linen is ancient, but it's far less impactful on the environment than cotton. And really working those into your collections and encouraging consumers to buy better if they're thinking about buying less.
Yeah, and how do you think things like emotional durability come into play with the actual pieces that we're owning?
Yeah, what we're seeing is a lot of trends around far more kind of timeless, what I would call kind of stealth wealth fashion coming through, particularly for older demographics. So really thinking about quite timeless pieces that also have much more kind of an inherent personal meaning. So, you know, not necessarily following a sort of the seasonal trend in the way that we might have done, you know, that we have done in the fast fashion arena for the last 20, 30 years, but a return to more individuality, personality, a bespoke look. No harm in standing out as a brand, as having a really kind of bespoke look and feel, and that will encourage as well people buying into your brand and thinking about these pieces as more sort of, you know, really personal, kind of long-standing heirloom wardrobe items.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you were talking about systems and functions earlier on, being able to have people love their clothes for longer. We don't always all know how to mend a button or sew a seam, right? So maybe there's functions and systems that can come into play with.
So I think that emotional durability is a super interesting concept, because people, when they think about durability, it's always about the physical aspects and how long can it last.
Yeah.
But then you can have an amazing durable item that can last years and years, but if people don't actually want to wear it and don't have any emotional attachment to it whatsoever, then it ends up being wasted either way. So it's important, I think, from the design perspective to consider the implications that it will have in the system, and, you know, why will certain people, what are the interventions of certain people who like to use it, for what purpose, for how long, how can maybe it can be disassembled fast, so like be used for longer. Maybe there's like customization service that comes with it, that you know, so that you can make it your own and then create that sort of like, you know, individualism with that piece. I don't know. There are many different ways where I think you can make sure that that person really, you know, loves that item and wants to wear it again. So I guess the first step is making sure that it can withstand the number of wears, and the other one is to make sure that people actually want to wear it for that long. And if not, maybe you on purpose know that it won't be worn for like that, you know, that many times, and then should it be actually be sold, or should people access that type of item through a different way, like renting it or you know, sharing it or whatever it is, so that, you know, it needs to be from like the design stage.
Yeah, and being a designer in practice, I see that it could be an evolution of a garment. So, okay, how are we going to make that evolution last for 20 years, 30 years of a person's life, where your body shape might change, you know, where your tastes are definitely going to change? How can you kind of put that individualism on your stuff that you're going to take into the future? So exciting. And sustainability ultimately now has to move into circular and indeed regenerative functions, just like any product. How do you see vegan fashion sitting within circularity?
With the regenerative conversation, so just as you were mentioning, there are now many innovations that actually don't need as many chemicals or pollute the environment as much, compared to a few years back when people were still trying to innovate in terms of like alternative leather or alternative wool, for example. So I think now we're in a closed stage. However, to make everything regenerative, like the actual practice needs to leave the land as it was or improve it. So right now, most agricultural methods are actually diminishing the land biodiversity. So we need to make sure that whichever alternative we move to, the actual process it's in the same line. And what's interesting is that right now, because it tends to be slower as well, like the pace in which those crops grow, then right now, like, we cannot just automatically switch from one to the other because it will take a little bit of time. So there's this in-transition period where I think that we need to be more aware of, and that's also, again, why it's so important to keep using what we have so much, so that we allow this kind of like time and space for Earth to start regenerating, and we can create more of these new, sometimes they're ancient processes, but it's just like people are not putting it or applying it at this point in time. So it's maybe going back sometimes to how it was before, like how people were, processing these crops before, or growing the crops before, and allowing kind of like, fashion to keep the fashion sense while this transition is happening slowly.
Yeah, I agree with Marilyn. I think there's huge space here to be reusing what exists beyond the vegan agenda. So all kinds of fabrics that are in existence, we have to keep the lifespan of those going, and there's loads of really exciting things that we can be doing in terms of upcycling and utilising old dead stock. It's better that it's used than it's not used. And in addition to that, as I said earlier, I think there's so many exciting ways in which we can be building into our collections really, really great fabrics that have far lower footprint, that are vegan, or potentially in something like leather, in the future, in the very near future, will have the potential to be entirely vegan. So I think it's an exciting space.
It is. So we'll start where we began, so vegan fashion. Is it a fad? Do you think we can create circular vegan fashion for the next age of these vegan sustainable citizens that are coming through?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the stats, as I mentioned earlier, 1 in 12 families bringing their children up in the UK as vegan. This is not a trend that's going away. And 73% of millennials regularly buying into vegan lifestyle products. So, I mean, it's definitely on a very fast trajectory.
Yeah, so we need to make sure that we're accommodating for that, right?
Yeah,
cool.
I think we need to work in not just the, I guess, non-animal fabrics, but in general, how do we make sure that every single material and product that we put into the market eliminates waste, is kept in circulation, and regenerates nature. So I think that's the wider picture challenge. And be it like vegan or not, I think we need to make sure that everything that we put into the market does that. So I think that it's interesting from the trends perspective to see how vegan has picked up so much in the last couple of years. So I think that if it's not going to go away, then the question is not how do we make it circular or not, but how do we make it circular or not, instead of like, will it happen or not, because it is happening already. So I think the challenge is there already. So if it's here to stay, is how do we make it work for a circular fashion industry?
Absolutely. So thank you, guys. I don't think we have any questions available, because I think she's gone with her thing. No, that's it. She's here. Are there any questions from the audience, just about veganism, circularity, why we've got our experts here? One over there. Olivia.
Hiya.
Hi.
I was wondering what you think about lower environmental impact animal-based materials, like we were hearing earlier about alpaca wool, and how that can be a more sustainable option than cashmere, for example. Do you think there is room in the market for animal-based, lower impact, circular materials, or are we maybe in the further future, 50 years' time, are we going to be totally vegan?
Yeah, I can start with that one. I think, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of regenerative agriculture, there are really exciting things happening in terms of wool farming, and I see that as definitely the way, not just the way things are moving in terms of vegan fashion, but it actually really ties in with what's happening in vegan food consumption and the really very fast shift that we're seeing towards, the need for us to be more responsibly farming meat, etc. So I see it working in tandem, really. Maybe it's behind that, that in terms of trend timeline, but it's certainly on a very similar trajectory. And if we don't do these things, and we're still farming sheep for meat the way that we are doing, and then farming them for wool the way that we are doing, etc., it's really it's not beneficial in terms of climate change at all. And so the responsible thing to be doing is to be looking at things like regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, I think there's definitely space for it. Because there's so many people in the world that you will need, different kind of material sources. So it's not. I think it's about making sure that that the system is in place so that it doesn't become is used for long and doesn't become waste at the end of its life. So yeah, there's no. I guess no single material is circular or not, because the circular economy is a whole economic system. So you cannot just single out material per material. So it's how is it working in the economy? So yeah,
I agree. It's like interactive whole systems. How do they interact? How do they work? Even as a vegan, I would look at wearing regeneratively grown leather, for instance, and that might sound really radical, but if that's regeneratively grown, if that's got a natural dye, if that's fully regenerative, I can chop that up and put it into the ground and that becomes nutrients for new crops, that's all good. So for me, it's about how we don't have to think in silos anymore, that we're thinking at how these things interact, how we look at building systems and functions. We've got another hand over here.
Hi, thank you all for your insights. I'm a fashion brand. I represent Gay Plus, and our target market kind of spans 20 to 50, 60-year-olds. And I wanted to ask, do you think it's true that investing in vegan fashion and ethical, sustainable fashion is more expensive? And is this the cost that how do we communicate the reason behind this cost to the consumer if it is more expensive? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really brilliant question, and I would say that the demographic sort of appetite for this kind of product is quite varied. So I highlighted millennials buying into vegan food products, 73% of them, but actually for Gen Z, it's slightly lower, it's 65%. So you imagine that that's going to rise as they get older. I told you the stat about the parents bringing their kids up as vegan from baby. But I think when you're looking at the value that you can attach to that kind of product, you have to look at the demographic quite clearly. And obviously, with younger demographics, that there are, it's hard to attach that kind of value to something, that what is the added value? Although we all think that Gen Z are the super kind of sustainably minded generation, they're not. It's actually, that's kind of a myth. And so I would be looking potentially more at older demographics with high disposable income, millennials plus, and thinking about, some of these fabrics at the moment in terms of price points are coming down in terms of these fabrications, but there is a perception that they're more expensive. So yes, I think you really need to kind of get that balance between price pointing, demographic, target, and how you really create a very strong value-added message around what you're doing.
I think you can use it in your branding and positioning as well, because actually you're creating something not just of value and of emotional durability, but you're creating something with integrity that, yes, you can showcase. It's sustainably made, it's ethical, it's vegan, whatever you want to showcase. And I'd love that to be a whole systems perspective. But you can make that a unique selling point so that you can position your brand in a certain way.
Because we get a lot of pushback because our brand targets also for plus size women, and
Sure.
so part of the question is like, oh, we're already paying a premium for plus
Got
size
it.
fashion, and now we're paying a premium for sustainability. So having the conversation with my customers has been really eye opening, but also left me in a, oh, what do I do if about
well,
pricing?
we should have a talk because with the ecosystem incubator, we come together with those small brands to start to create economic function. The economics is set up to big brands, right? Being able to say, I can buy 3,000 meters of that. Yeah. You guys can't, right? And actually, we don't want to. We don't want to overbuy and overproduce.
Yeah.
So let's come together and actually collaborate on that. Get a better MOQ, get a better price for your fabric, so you can be more effective on the market.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Guy behind you.
Hi, just want to say thank you very much for this presentation. It's very, very insightful. My question, or maybe it's more of a statement, is in terms of sustainability, would we maybe also need to combine alternative fabric and fashion sources with lifestyle choices? For example, I'm from a generation where if your sock tore, it was darned, or if the seam on your jeans came apart, my mum would get the sewing machine out and sew it up. But what I find also as a consultant is that a lot of people tend to have this how can I put this delicately, but it's more like a I don't want to say consumerist, but an appetite to always have to feel they have to buy, rather than maybe repair or restore something. So could that maybe be combined with the vision of sustainability in the fashion industry?
Completely. There's about 4 or 5 different seed brands at the moment that are addressing recycling, mending, like how do we get that from the consumer, mend it, take it back. So that there's companies that are coming up that you'll be able to click into as brands and say, hey, well, we will be able to create that repair function for you. One of them is in our ecosystem as well. So I think that that systems and functions is probably something you can speak to.
I think he just mentioned something quite interesting, which is that it wasn't always how it is right now, right? Because it has changed. So the reason that it has changed is because the industry itself has created this desire for more, and it's constantly making people feel kind of like the FOMO of like, no, I need to have this, and I need to buy this. And the reason of why that's happening is because the way that these companies grow and create profit is by selling more. So the more they produce, the more they sell, the more money they have. However, if we imagine a different world, which is a different circular fashion industry, where these companies are making more revenue streams per product, so they keep their margins high while actually producing less and relying less on the extraction of new materials, then we can start creating like a new way of doing business within fashion. So, and if we change it once, then we can create a desire for something else afterwards. So why can we not create the same desire that people have for like fast fashion towards second-hand fashion or rental fashion, or even repairs, like you were saying, that's automatically what you will do when you had a hole before. So like we had it before, so why can we not have it now?
It's quite interesting because in lockdown, we definitely saw a return in appetite for craft and for repair and renew. And it's sad that some of the things that we saw happening in lockdown maybe haven't resonated and accelerated themselves. But that's one particular trend that I think we're particularly passionate about, and are encouraging brands to think about how to kind of keep that energy going, because we have seen a return to craft and repairing and renewing, like nothing we've seen since the kind of 1950s or something. So it's definitely something to be encouraged. And I think particularly amongst younger consumers, although they might not be totally sustainably minded, they do have quite a passion for craft and repairing and renewing things. And if you think about the Depop revolution, that's very much part of it. It's like they're customizing, they're changing things up. So that's all to be encouraged, I think. and particularly, I think particularly with the younger demographic who are kind of creatively minded.
Us oldies are creative too. We have one more over there. Hello.
Hi everyone, my name's Alushala.
Hi.
I'd like to know if you think, with the conscious consumers, if technology, things like AR, VR, NFT, and all those new things that are coming up might be part of the agenda to make circularity and sustainability work.
Ooh, interesting question. I mean, I was speaking to this earlier on with someone who has a factory or a function. When we can like build in the 3D space for things like Clo and things like that, but some of the functions in the factory end haven't got an actual link into that yet. So I think it's maybe in its infancy, but I think that it's a big trend that's coming forward that could probably, you can speak to a bit more in terms of the AI tech.
Yeah, I mean, digital fashion is certainly something that we need to have our eye on. I think it's still very hard to interpret it into your own business agendas. It's very much kind of, at the moment, I think it's still very much for the kind of Nikes and the Adidases of the world and, huge big global brands, or it's very much kind of, niche or aimed at kind of like gaming communities and or luxury kind of fashion communities. So I think it's still very hard to interpret in a truly commercial, grassroots sense. But again, it does have a role to play, and it's a trend that isn't going away. So it's one. I think the most important thing is to know where it's relevant for you as a business, and not to think that you have to get on that bandwagon, because in actual fact, I think we're a long way off from that, where it's sort of impacting on everyday fashion. It's impacting in places, but it's really still quite specific.
I think it's an interesting context with things like blockchain, where we can start to decentralize what we're doing, think about our localities instead of just a global thing as well. I mean, do you have anything to speak to on AI?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how they're using AI to reduce the amount of samples that some companies are doing, which I think is fantastic. Then also to try-ons and trying to find the perfect fit of people as well, which I think is also great because it reduces the number of returns, and we know that many returns. I don't have an exact percentage, but it can be up to 60% or 70% of returns cannot be sold again, which is quite shocking actually. So if you can get some technology to reduce that, then obviously why not? But I completely agree that in terms of like how and when are you using it, really very much depends on your brand and how you are set up and how you can make most of that investment that you put into it in terms of like what you're getting back from it. So what are your key areas? So yeah.
Yeah, brilliant question. Any other questions out there? Or one more over there? And one down at the front?
Hello,
Hi.
thank you very much for speaking with us about such an important topic. So for a new business, a new company trying to start up in the sustainability fashion space, what would you say have been the most challenges for like small businesses, fashion companies starting up? And any advice that you would give as well, and words of encouragement, I guess, as well.
Yeah. No,
Sorry,
cool.
3 things there. I've
No,
asked
all good.
for.
I work with a lot of micro brands, people starting up in sustainability or even starting up in the industry so a lot of the brands that I work with, the CEOs, they didn't come from a fashion space at all. So I have courses that people can get involved with, but even the problems you were saying, the first things are generally MOQs, finding the right fabrics, knowing what they are, knowing if there are any unintended consequences, let alone even trying on circularity. So it's looking at your business and what you're creating. Is that functional? Is it durable? Where is it created? But also knowing that this is a journey, even for the big guys. Yeah, so you'll come in and you can start. If you can start small as small as possible, do your agile runs, see what happens, then go in deep in it instead of overproducing. But that takes something. And again, have a chat with me about the ecosystem, because we can start to bring people together to help build brands, you know. So, anyone else?
Yeah.
Sorry, go.
No, I think that absolutely what you said, that it's a journey, it's iterative, and it's collaborative. So I think that what some companies feel, especially when they're starting out, is like the challenge is almost too big for them to like do any difference. And actually, there are many companies out there that are working on specifically just on reverse logistics or in specific material innovations. So you don't need to do it all to be able to make a difference. So I think that's one of the key things that I will say. So it's kind of like, look out there, like who is working on an area that you know that you don't have the resources or capabilities to act, and how can you partner with them or try to find a way to collaborate so that you make the most of what, you know, the system that is already in place, and actually you help them probably scale and they help you. So it will be like, you know, kind of like a positive collaboration cycle. So I think that's one of the important things.
Like really do your research, like who out there has got the same idea as you. More often than not, there is someone else out there who has the same idea. Maybe you could collaborate and come together and build that together instead of like struggling separately, for instance.
I think as well, really get your brand message across very clearly and in a really authentic way, because that's still such a big issue for small brands, is trying to get their sustainable message across. And you know, quite often you find it's a great product, but no one knows about it, and it's still there are a couple of issues. Some of it sometimes you see, you know, you do come across kind of greenwashing, and it's just kind of doesn't really have any kind of authenticity. But then other times it's just like the message is lost despite it being a great product. So yeah, I think marketing is really super important at the moment.
So absolutely, again, some of the stuff we do in the incubator is to kind of start to create those collaborative marketing strategies that can work together. You could come together and create a press day, for instance, or something like that, right? You know, and I think a lot of the small micro brands that I work with personally in the ecosystem, their integrity is way up here. They want to do like such good work. The problem is the economics and the economics of scale, exactly with that whole marketing piece, you know. So, yeah, hope that answers your question. Cool, that was a great session. Anyone else for questions? Any more, or are we done? I think we're done. Yeah, all good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, please do come over and say hi.